America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live inside of Studio West coming up. I've got Olivia Beavers from Politico, Chairman Mike Gallagher coming up. I have to begin, though. Yesterday, Speaker McCarthy had a press conference in the Hall of Congress. And unlike the respect usually paid to Speaker Pelosi, a few legacy media reporters were just giving speeches and yelling at him. And Kevin McCarthy brought the hammer down on an unnamed legacy media reporter who kept interrupting him. Cut number 2. Combustible Kevin.
But you also will be able to raise for your full House, taking off other Democrats for House Representative Omar. But you said that lying to us is something that means you should be removed from the Intelligence Committee. But why is it not a factor?
Well, let me be very...
This is a man who should not be on committee, something you do have power over.
He's got elected by his district.
Now,
so
answer my question. Why is lying?
Okay, let me be very clear and respectful to you. You ask me a question. When I answer it, it's the answer to your question. You don't get to determine whether I answer your question or not, okay? In all respect. Thank you.
Not right there. I just want to say, combustible Kevin, I like the look. Not a lot. You can't bring that out often. But when the legacy media starts throwing DNC talking points at you, and that's what's going on there. I don't know who the reporter is. I will ask Olivia Beavers. Maybe it was Olivia. I doubt it. Olivia is not a talking point machine for the DNC. But someone from the left wing pops in there. You're not answering my question. We'll not let him answer. All right. You're not allowed to answer. You've got to give. You've got to somehow indict the Republican Party when you answer. I like Speaker McCarthy's style. He very rarely brings out the hammer, but when he does, he hits you in the knees. Now, speaking about hitting you in the knees, Never Give an Inch is rocketing up the bestseller list. It's Mike Pompeo's new memoir. He sat down with me last week. This is part 5 of my conversation with the former Secretary of State. Let's roll that tape. Mike Pompeo on Never Give an Inch. You received an invitation, or you asked for an invitation to speak to the Republican Governors Association, to the National Governors Association, NGA. And they said, what Secretary of State, what? And you showed up and you told them that each of them had been classified by the Chinese government. That got their attention. Will you tell the audience a little bit about that story, which they've got to read in full to appreciate? But the CCP has a file on every governor, and they are classified.
So I had seen hints of this when I was a CIA director, but by the time I became Secretary of State, I was able to see it more clearly. And I was able to get this document declassified. It was written nominally by a Chinese think tank. But what they'd done at the direction of the Chinese Communist Party was to continue to evaluate all 50 governors of the United States of America, and they would rank them friend, foe, or we're working on them. And by the time I got it declassified, I'd also noted that there was a meeting in Washington, D.C., where all the governors would be. And so I called Governor Hogan and then Governor of New York, Cuomo, and asked for 20 minutes. They gave me 20 minutes on a Saturday afternoon. It was a pretty sleepy day. But when I began to lay out for them the fact that the Chinese Communist Party was watching them, observing them, running influence operations against them, and had measured them, had rated them, essentially said, do we have them in our pocket yet or not? Boy, I had their attention. They all turned immediately to their devices or to their chiefs of staff and says, hey, I got to have a copy of that. I got to know where I am. And I wanted them to just be a little taken aback, but mostly I wanted to remind them that this isn't just an attack on our federal government. It is at every level of our government today that the Chinese Communist Party is conducting its assault against our freedoms.
It's a fabulous alert in Never Give an Inch. I'm going to move on now, except thank you for calling out, quote, the Holy See's hypocrisy on China. Rome gave many inches on the religious freedom of Catholics. Our American first foreign policy did not. As a Catholic, I'm grateful that you called them on that. Do you think Francis has any idea what his diplomats are doing, or is the Vatican State Department as disconnected from executive branch leadership as ours is?
Boy, I think it's pretty disconnected, but I also think it's very consistent with what the Pope has come to understand as being in the Vatican's best interest. But your point's well taken. People should know the Vatican has a massive foreign policy establishment and can be incredibly productive in the world. They have this moral authority that none other has. And so I was pleading with them. I remember when President Reagan worked with Thatcher and Pope John Paul II, right? They changed the nature of history. And I wanted this Vatican under this Pope to help me change the history for people inside of China. Instead, they cut a deal, letting essentially the CCP select who the Chinese church leadership would be. Church has never permitted that to happen before. And boy, I wrote a piece in First Things. I was told, nope, turns out Pope's got to wash his hair that day, canceled the meeting on me because I'd simply called out the truth. I brook no ill towards them. I simply wanted the Pope to use his moral authority to protect the Chinese people right to practice their faith inside of their country. I regret that it took a conservative Republican to make this argument. This should be something that every American cares deeply about around the world. And so, yes, no, I've been sanctioned by Iran, banned from Russia. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't like me, and the Vatican wouldn't let me come see the Pope.
And the Pope canceled on you. Okay, let's go to the last thing I discovered about China that I want to bring up. We had Taiwan contact guidelines. You got rid of them, but it took forever. It's sort of like the Kajrut, I think I'm saying that right, about the law outside of the law to make sure we don't get to Taiwan. Do you think when you left the Department of State, we had corrected the over protection of Chinese feelings at the expense of Taiwan?
We'd made real progress. Now, this is one of the things I'm very proud of. We, for decades, had been so afraid of the Chinese Communist Party and their response, right? You send a diplomat to the island and they demarch you, they scream, and we'd allowed that to put us in the corner and cower. And we had a set of rules that basically said no American can meet with senior Taiwanese officials. It was possible, but it was essentially a ban. It took me till the very end, I can't remember, 18th, 19th, 20th of January, somewhere late in the term to actually get it fixed because I let the department run its process. Every time I sent a memo downstairs, it'd come back different. And finally, I just said, I won't tell you exact words I used. But in the end, we got it done. And we put the relationship in a place that respects the independence and autonomy of Taiwan in a way that is wholly appropriate for the United States of America in 2023.
Mr. Secretary, you write in the book a couple of occasions when you went full howitzer. At one point, your staff wouldn't let you visit a military hospital in Kyiv, and you went full howitzer. You talk about being tough. You talk about, and your language can be colorful sometimes in the way that soldiers are colorful. But you're an evangelical. You always have been. I did not know until I read Never Give an Inch. You taught fifth grade Sunday school. Now, as a former failed fifth grade Sunday school teacher, how did you keep the boys in their chairs?
Oh, my goodness. I think I failed at that, too. The answer was a lot of prayer, some good luck, a little bit of distraction to keep them focused on something that was of interest to them. Yeah, teaching fifth grade Sunday school was a joy. I did it with my wife. We had a couple other couples that co-taught alongside of us. It was a simple part of my life. It's the kind of things that I hope Americans all across the country are doing, serving their community, the things they value, and in my case, my faith, in a way that's pretty simple and pretty easy and passes along the values to the next generation that we all care about.
I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed Never Give an Inch. Now, I've known Mike Pompeo since he was a weekly guest on this radio show, and the former Secretary of State is now a very accomplished diplomat, probably running for president. I'm in Switzerland. I don't know who's going to be our nominee. I wish them all well, but I do love this book, and I love that story about fifth grade Sunday school. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I took a group of 2-year-olds, and we taught them every year through the end of fifth grade. And then I said, no mas. Roberto Durandit. Is that the right name? Not right? The guy who said, no mas, no mas. And I said, I'm not handling these squirrely boys anymore. And so when I read that in Pompeo's Never Give an Inch, that he'd been a fifth grade Sunday school teacher, I thought, the Chinese are pretty tough, and the Iranians want to kill you, and the Putin calls you a tank man, but try handling fifth grade Sunday school boys. That passage on the Vatican was so overdue. And it's being said by a former Secretary of State. It is very hard to miss the implication that the Catholic Church has collapsed in China in the face of the Chinese Communist Party. And I blame this on the Vatican. And I'm going to turn to the Washington Post next week. This is not good for a Catholic to do, but we got to do something about the Vatican. And I do not know how you can go from St. John Paul II defeating communism to collapsing in the face of genocide, repression of the Catholic Church, and singing Kumbaya with the Chinese Communist Party. Mike Pompeo calls it out. Good for you, Mr. Secretary. Back America, I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm waiting for Mike Gallagher, congressman from Wisconsin, who is not, now that he's Chairman Gallagher, I suppose he's going to be a hard date, right? So, and he's a young freshman congressman taking over the vaunted David Dreyer chair on the Hugh Hewitt show. For 23 years, we've had one member of Congress appear regularly every week. Originally, it was David Dreyer. David Dreyer was followed by John Campbell. John Campbell was followed by Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton was followed by Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo was followed by Mike Gallagher. And so everyone else has always made it on time. I mean, Dreyer was always on time. Campbell was on time. We always had John, as I said, Tom Cotton was on briefly. He was always on time, but he only stayed 2 years in the House for a cup of coffee. Mike Pompeo made his appointment every week. And Mike Gallagher has decided to join us. Now that he's Chairman Gallagher, I guess we're just going to have to be more deferential. But David Dreyer was chairman of the Rules Committee, and he'd show up on time. And so I'm just wondering, is it the new rules? You know, just kind of slide into the chair, Chairman Gallagher?
You know, I'm reminded of what Thomas Paine said in Common Sense, that which we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. So I figured I'd just let you work for it a little bit, Hugh, you know, keep you waiting. I feel like our relationship has become too casual, too familiar. And now that
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll buck up. I want to begin by complaining. I have read the list of members on the House Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. You are the chairman from Wisconsin. Rob Whitman, great member from Virginia. Blaine Lutkemeyer of Missouri, great member. Andy Barr of Kentucky, great member. Dan Newhouse of Washington, great member. John Molinar of Michigan man. Okay, went to Hope College, not the University of, but we'll come back to that. Darren LaHood of Illinois, great member. Neil Dunn of Florida. Jim Banks of Indiana, superb choice, going to be a senator. Dusty Johnson of South Dakota. Michelle Steele, my old colleague in Orange County. We served on a commission together for many years, the Orange County Children and Families Commission. She's fabulous. Ashley Hinson of Iowa. I point out, we got an Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin. Big Ten heavy. There are no Buckeyes on this committee. It is clearly animus on the part of the chairman.
You know, I couldn't stomach someone providing you supporting fires every week. And I've harbored a deep suspicion of anybody from Ohio. So I had to weigh in and prevent any Ohioans. Is that what we call them? Ohioans?
Buckeyes, as in the genuine national champions of college football, but for an errant kick. As you know, it was an errant kick from Noah Ruggles. Otherwise, tell me something about Kevin McCarthy has done a brilliant job of balance. Let's get serious. I love the Big Ten influence, but these are members from all over. They're serious people, whether it's Rob Whitman in Virginia or all the way to California, Michelle Steele. These are very serious people. Everybody must have wanted to be on this committee. Chairman Gallagher, how did the leader and how did the speaker and you narrow it down?
We had a massive demand. And in particular, I think we had a lot of freshmen who really wanted to serve. And unfortunately, that we weren't able to get any freshmen on because of the demand for more senior members. My hope is that in subsequent Congresses, they get on. I think the speaker looked at a few things. One is demonstrated competence on the issue set, a proven track record of taking this competition with the Chinese Communist Party seriously, having a legislative record of doing so. And two, a representation of various committees that are going to be particularly critical to this effort. So I'd like to highlight the fact that you see two members of the Financial Services Committee in Blaine Lutkemeyer and Andy Barr. That's absolutely essential because probably the most complex aspect of this competition with the CCP is the idea of selective economic and financial decoupling. Andy Barr was an essential part of the debate on CFIUS reform, Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. So he and Blaine are going to be absolutely essential. You see three appropriators for similar reasons. You're going to actually need money when it comes to things like arming Taiwan to the teeth, when it comes to rebuilding our own munitions industrial base. All of the hard power elements of our strategy require a sensible investment. And then we have some superb communicators on the committee. You mentioned Michelle Steele, who has a really compelling personal background related to this issue. Her parents fled a totalitarian regime in North Korea, represents a district with probably one of the largest populations of Asian Americans in the country.
One of the most diverse districts in America. And she's a fabulous supervisor and congresswoman. Great choice.
Ashley Hinson, exceptional communicator, well-respected, gets the job done in Congress.
We got to mention Ashley Hinson went to USC. So we're going to have to overcome that problem. Okay,
Yeah,
so she doesn't know anything about football.
I wonder what her allegiances are now, because she represents Iowa. I don't know. If she's
You're going to have to dig deep there, but realize you have a Trojan horse. I mean, a real Trojan on your committee.
And then Carlos Jimenez in Florida. We already talked last night about him being a point man on Spanish language media. There's an obvious connection because China's making massive investments in our own hemisphere, in Central and South America, in Mexico, right on our border. And obviously, particularly in South Florida, the idea of having to live under the threat of a totalitarian regime, particularly with Cuban exiles and people with family in Venezuela, is not some sort of distant threat. It's a clear and present danger. So I'm really excited about the range of members we have in terms of representing various committees. Final thing I'd say for Jim Banks, obvious leader on this issue, has been incredibly aggressive on sounding the alarm, particularly on the issue of Chinese Communist Party money distorting the perception of our universities and the influence in higher education in America. And then Rob Whitman has obviously been the chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee on Armed Services. There's nobody who understands the critical role of rebuilding the United States Navy in terms of deterring World War III better than Rob Whitman.
No, I think it's fabulous. I am waiting with bated breath. Those are the 10 Republicans. I am hoping that the 7 Democrats are serious. There are at least 7 serious Democrats on the CCP. Any word on when Hakeem Jeffries is going to name them?
I had, there's a rumor that they were going to name him last night or today. I haven't seen anything. We hear whispers of who the finalists are. The names I've heard are all serious. So I'm just excited to get to work. And so I'm hoping that Hakeem Jeffries names the members today, because we got a lot to do. We got to organize, we got to get office space. And if we're trying to hold hearings in the next few weeks, which we are, I need the Democrats to participate. So fingers crossed they get their act together and name people today. Hugh, on a slightly related topic, I also want to point out that on the Intelligence Committee, we got some fantastic new members. Mike Waltz, just brilliant guy with an incredible background.
I always have to declare, my son works for Waltz, so I always have to declare that. Yes, he's a special operator to keep you Marines in check.
Well, that shows you how smart Waltz is. He had the perspicacity to hire my second favorite Hewitt behind your wife. And then Dan Crenshaw on the Intelligence Committee. So there you have 2 battle-tested combat veterans, special operators on the Intelligence Committee. That's fantastic. French Hill also on the Intelligence Committee.
Yes.
Probably the most thoughtful member of Congress. So we're getting the right people.
Since we're talking about Intel, can we talk about the documents that are showing up I just had on Mike Pompeo, and he said, look, I had skiffs in my house when I was director of the CIA in state. I don't know how these documents ended up in Mike Pence's house, Joe Biden's house. Donald Trump has actually authority to move them around until he's actually not president anymore. But nevertheless, they're everywhere. Do you have any documents in your house? You're a member of the Intel Committee. I mean, have you got them check your pockets before you answer, Congressman?
No, I don't. But I have some sensitive documents related to the 2010-2011 NFL season, where, of course, the Packers won the Super Bowl. I have various newspapers from the morning after the Super Bowl. But beyond that, it's just a bunch of old notebooks from college and grad school. And then just sort of accumulation of toys for little girls that the grandparents keep flooding us with for my 2 daughters.
That's good. That's our job. But what do you make of this? It's astonishing to me that there's this much sloppiness going on, because one page with one name can get people killed. I asked former Secretary of State Pompeo, many of our networks in China got rolled up right before he got to the CIA. There was obviously a leak somewhere, and the Chinese Communist Party executed them or sent them to the gulag. Somebody screwed up. This is very serious stuff. What is going on with our skiffs and our indifference to it?
It's really sloppy. And I don't know if it's kind of a function of White House culture, where you're not you have the Situation Room, which is cleared as a skiff, but then you have the Oval Office, and obviously people are bringing classified documents into the Oval Office, and the president sort of occupies this unique position as a declassification authority. But it makes no sense to me as a counterintelligence officer, because these documents really should never leave a skiff unless they're in transit from one skiff. And I broke the rule on no acronyms. A sensitive compartmented information facility is a skiff. They should really never leave that. And so, and also there needs to be obviously a more robust process for when people leave the White House or leave office, VP or president, to screen all these documents prior to their transmission to a private residence or the National Archives. Something has broken down in the system fundamentally. This is just casual. It's sloppy. And to your point, it's a dangerous precedent from a national security perspective.
Congressman, Mr. Chairman, I got to call you Mr. Chairman if you're going to show up on time. I want to finish by talking about what Mike Pompeo just and I were talking about. In his book, he recounts that he went to the National Governors Association and surprised them all by telling them that China has ranked each governor in the United States as easy to work with, difficult to work with, not able to work with, an opponent of China. They watch everyone. The members of your committee are now on a list. And do they know that? Do they know that they are now going to come under extreme focus, pressure, and attempts to compromise?
We had a conversation about it last night. I showed them some of the recent propaganda from CCP entities talking about the committee, referring to us as the stone throwers. To make 2 points. One, you have to assume that from here on out, everything you say and do is going to be closely scrutinized. So we all have to up our game in terms of counterintelligence and communication. But also to show that in some ways, I think the CCP fears this effort. They don't want us to be successful. And what they fear more than anything is that we will be successful in forging a bipartisan consensus in getting tough to deter CCP aggression. They want to divide Washington, D.C., and they want to elevate the camp that favors sort of neo-engagement and, false cooperation with the CCP. So they're paying attention. I think they're afraid, but we need to conduct ourselves in a professional manner and be careful in what we say. To that point, Hugh, I think we made news last week when I announced my intention to, talk to executives in Disney and NBA, which I stand by. I just would say my opening move isn't to subpoena people and throw bombs. I would like to give these companies or industries or major asset managers the opportunity to explain how they think about doing business in China. I fully understand how complex that is, particularly after 2 decades of trying to integrate China into the global economy. But we have to have a robust and at times difficult conversation in order to put ourselves on a footing to win this competition.
This is going to be the long telegram committee. It's designed to alert the world to the CCP, and you're going to be successful. But to be called a stone thrower, I think they're borrowing from Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. That's why they're calling you stone throwers. Mike Gallagher, Chairman Gallagher, thank you for joining me. We'll give you that Gallagher entrance music next week. Sort of, here comes the chairman music. Thank you, sir. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm playing Linda Ronstadt and the Stone Cold Ponies because Mike Gallagher just told us the Chinese Communist Party are calling them stone throwers on the new Select Committee on China. Great interview with the chairman. I'm joined now by Olivia Beavers of Politico, who will be covering the Gallagher Committee very, very closely. Good morning, Olivia. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm good. How are you?
I am terrific. I've got to ask, I don't want to embarrass you. Were you at the press conference yesterday when Kevin McCarthy became Combustible Kevin and went out after a reporter?
I got there like 4 minutes late, so I think that I missed that sort of feisty back and forth. But I was there when he was talking about Eric Swalwell and Adam Schiff. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Who was the reporter who asked the first question and then interrupted him and then got the hammer?
I think I missed that. Unfortunately, so I need to go back and watch. Darn.
Okay. It's making the rounds. It's probably the most viral moment Kevin McCarthy has had because he stopped a reporter and said, she said, "You're not answering my question." And he said, "The answer I give you is my answer." It was very good, Olivia. Anyway, what do you make of Speaker McCarthy? Is he coming into his own? Is he feeling better in the role?
I think so. I mean, this is a position he's wanted for a while, and he's holding these sort of interesting press conferences that are, like where you can see the people's house is sort of the goal of them. And so that's where it was today. And it was packed when I ran up just a few minutes late, and he's answering questions. He can be feisty at times, but usually he's sort of got this bubbly, jovial sense about him. So it's funny seeing his feisty side come out, and I guess I missed it yesterday.
Yeah, well, I've known Kevin since 1989, and I have never seen him be combustible before. First time in 30 years I've seen that. So it was an interesting moment. I think you got to be careful when you ask questions. Olivia, I just talked to Chairman Gallagher about the committee. They're waiting on the 7 Democrats. I'm also waiting on the weaponization committee members. When do we get the names for the Democrats on the Gallagher committee and everyone on the Jordan committee?
Well, so with the Democrats, I ran up to Congressman Andy Kim and I asked him when we would expect to see it. They don't really have guidance on that. But one of the things, and I don't have reporting to suggest this, but something that I'm curious about is whether they're waiting to see how the fight with Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell play out before they name the members. And I think that their plan is to populate the other committees that are not select committees and then go ahead and do this one. So that's something that we're probably going to see is they're going to be filling out the other ones, and then we'll see what happens with China and the weaponization committee.
Yeah, Olivia, the Schiff and the Swalwell story is over. They're not getting on. You don't back down from that. They're not on that committee, and it's that one's over. If they put Schiff and Swalwell on the China committee, I hope that McCarthy throws them off of that as well for the same reason. This is highly sensitive. They can go do small business. They can go do House oversight. They can do weaponization. They can preen. But do Democrats really see an upside in focusing attention on the fact that Eric Swalwell was sleeping with a Chinese Communist Party agent?
I think that they're looking more of it as a way to fight against McCarthy, so they're not shying away from it. That's why you saw Hakeem Jeffries decide to put Schiff and Swalwell, or suggested he was going to name them on Intel, and that set up the entire fight with McCarthy. But and I forgot to tell you earlier, we do have names of Republicans for the FBI weaponization.
Oh, yeah. Who are they?
So you have Darrell Issa. He was a former chairman. You have
Very
Thomas
good.
Massey. Mm-hmm.
Very right wing.
Chris Stewart, who is on the House Intelligence Committee.
Very smart. Good.
Elise Stefanik, familiar name. She's good at
Very
messaging.
smart.
She's also on the Intelligence Committee.
Chair of the conference.
Mm-hmm. Mike Johnson, constitutional lawyer. And
Wait, where's Mike from?
He's from Louisiana.
Okay, I don't know him.
He's in Republican leadership. He's a constitutional lawyer. He's been on House Judiciary. You probably saw his name float during the first impeachment of Donald Trump. He was sort of a quick questioner. You have Chip Roy. Who,
yes, good.
We've talked about before and thought he was going to be here. Kelly
Former
Armstrong.
assistant United States attorney, so he knows how to ask questions. That's why I like Chip Roy being on there.
And so does Kelly Armstrong, by the way. So he's also, I think, a
Yes.
federal prosecutor. Yeah, former federal prosecutor. You have Greg Steube of Florida. He's the one who was recently injured in a really kind of horrific fall on his property. So he might be out for a little while, but he has been sitting on judiciary. You have Dan Bishop, who also, I think, has a legal background. He was one of the 20, along with Chip Roy. So only two of them. Kat Kammick, a former House staffer, and then Harriet Hageman, who's the only freshman on that committee.
There are no Buckeyes on either the Gallagher committee or the Jordan committee other than Jordan. I guess Jordan counts because he's the chairman.
Yep, but I think that this is going to be like I was wondering if it was going to be a little bit less manageable, but this is going to be a committee that I think will be pretty on message and able to stay, focused in what they're pursuing.
I'm worried about Massey, but everyone else you named is good. I'm worried about Massey screwing up the thing, but those are good members. Those are very good members. The Gallagher committee is very, very good. Olivia, you're very, very good. Thank you for joining me as always from Politico. Olivia Beavers, not the reporter who got in trouble with Combustible Kevin yesterday. Glad to hear that. Thank you, Olivia. We'll talk to you next week. Don't go anywhere, America. Hour 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show straight ahead. Hewitt in Studio West, reminding you I'm going to be at the RNC meetings the next 2 days. Generalissimo is sitting in for me tomorrow and Friday, so be prepared for that. Joined now by my colleague, Jim Geraghty. Geraghty the indispensable. No, I didn't go to National Review. Jim Geraghty joined the conservative team over at the Washington Post opinion section as a regular columnist. So we are now colleagues. Geraghty, there are two kinds of Republicans who work in legacy media, missionaries and refugees. You and I are missionaries. We're willing to go where we need to go to put forward the good word. And what's the reaction among conservatives to seeing that you've joined up with the Washington Post opinion pages?
It's underwhelming. Hugh, to be honest. I'm not sure anyone's noticed. I'm not sure anyone. By the way, I'm realizing now that this is a visual one. Some people are hearing us on radio and all that stuff. I've left the door to my bathroom open, and I probably shouldn't do that for all your viewers. So hang on one second.
But I actually don't mind if you're
Important news people tune in for.
Okay, you should put something on the door, though. Go ahead.
Yeah. So no, it's great. Look, for a long time, I would look at a George Will or a Charles Krauthammer, and I thought that was like the most valuable job in conservatism, right? Because, like, look, God bless National Review, God bless American Spectator, the old Weekly Standard, every conservative magazine. There's a need to say, hey, conservatives, this is what we believe, hash out our arguments, all that stuff. But what's done in talk radio, what's done in Fox, all that stuff has value. But like I said, to be a missionary, to be an argument to say, hey, you person who don't think of yourself as conservative, here's something that might be of value. Here is an argument that you may not have heard before. And here's why conservatives see the world that they do. And here's why they have a case. One of the recent columns was about the Democratic governor of Colorado shipping out migrants to cities like New York and Chicago. Now, voluntarily, the Governor Polis would emphasize. But everyone kind of observed, well, that's, wait a minute, I thought, this was supposed to be like the human rights crime of all time. And that, Ron DeSantis was history's greatest monster for sending them to Martha's Vineyard and all that kind of stuff. And I went and I said, look, here's a Democratic governor who's doing the same thing. And oh, by the way, eventually Lori Lightfoot of Chicago and Mayor Adams of New York complained and said, and eventually Governor Polis dropped this and said, okay, I'm not going to do this. But this means that the argument that our border states and Western states are being overwhelmed and they just don't have the resources to take care of these people, this isn't some crazy right-wing talking point. This isn't some expression of deep-rooted conservative xenophobia. This is reality. And even a Democratic governor is doing this. So when I can make the argument to a Washington Post audience, hey, this thing that's been dismissed as crazy ideological extremism, well, Democrats are doing it too, so maybe it's not just that. Maybe there's a real problem here, and maybe we need a more serious discussion about how to solve this problem.
No, I want to compliment David Shipley, our mutual boss over there, because he's actually looking for conservative voices that can persuade on the center right, and he's done a great job in bringing you on to join the Thiessen, Olson, Hewitt trio. And now I want to just one piece, don't read the comments. Do not read the comments. There's like a professional group. I recently wrote a column that had 10,000 comments, and I called up and asked, how many people read it? 580,000 people read it. I normally don't ask, but that's your rough ratio of comments to readers is 10,000 to 580,000. But I got to tell you, I think more conservatives have to lean into doing this, Jim, and they're unwilling. Our friend Mary Catherine Ham will go on CNN. People are unwilling to do it because they get beat up a lot, but they've got to do it or we're never going to win the argument. And I think if media doesn't allow conservatives on, they're going to die. We're all going to become siloed. And I do worry about that.
Oh, absolutely. And, the other observation is we need mainstream media institutions to say, okay, it's worth having a conservative voice on here, and let's put them onto this into this venue. Let's allow this argument to be heard. I was thinking about this because I was watching a movie that had somebody playing a young P.J. O'Rourke. It was the movie about the guy who founded National Lampoon. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about P.J. O'Rourke's role and how many big mainstream publications and institutions. ABC News sent him to cover the Persian Gulf War, right? P.J. O'Rourke, let's wait, phenomenal talent and who was just so funny and just so good. And also by some fair-minded. Like when he thought Republicans were acting like a bunch of idiots, he would call them a bunch of idiots. But to me, that was almost like the prototype of what you'd want to be that conservative who's so good, who's so smart, who's so funny, who's so insightful of illuminating something that the liberal media institutions would have to say, you know what, this guy's so good, we got to put him on there. And I kind of
Mark Stein and Michael Kelly, also the late Michael Kelly, the late Charles Krauthammer, George Will, they have all done the same thing. Mollie Hemingway's coming up. Mollie does it. Mary Catherine does it. It's difficult, but occasionally you got to blast your own people. Occasionally you have to make sure that your credibility is true. Jim, I want to turn subjects on you very quickly. This is a long piece. I've got to play it for you to get your reaction. It's my friend Joy Reid on MSNBC, and I wonder what your reaction to it is. Can we play cut 15 for Jim Geraghty, please?
The law is aimed at eradicating the teaching of history, gender identity, and sexual orientation in favor of curriculum that centers and lionizes people who look like Ron DeSantis. Just take a look at what AP courses are deemed educationally valuable in the state of Florida, per the book banning wannabe president. European history, of course, along with courses on the history and language of Italy, where DeSantis' family hails from, Germany, and Japan, which happen to be the Axis countries the U.S. fought during World War II. Now, whether Ron would consider fascist Italy to have been a bad guy in that war, well, that's up for debate.
Goes on for 2.5 minutes. Jim, that's
saying,
enough. Well, at some point, does a media organization cross a line when they're no longer a media organization?
Yeah. An extension of the Democratic National Committee. I mean, you could argue that MSNBC has been that for a long while. And I'm glad you and Joy Reid get along. I have not met her, and I have no particular personal interaction with her, but I've always thought she was one of the worst. That her program was basically Democrats are the good guys, Republicans are the bad guys. And not only are Republicans the bad guys, they're fascist, they're Nazi, they're white supremacists, blah, blah, blah. Blah.
That's what we just heard.
Yes.
They're the Axis countries.
She's now become what conservatives say when they're trying to make fun of her. That is kind of the exaggerated portrait, the caricature. She's become her own caricature. Look, my boss, Rich Lowry, one of my bosses, Rich Lowry, wrote a very good column on this, walking through the 4 categories that are in this AP course. And the first 3 are all fine. The first 3 are basically straightforward. Here's the history of African Americans in the United States, and here's how they shaped it. Everything from slavery, Civil War, segregation, up to the modern day. It's all fine. The 4th one is where you get into queer theory, and it's basically every bit of political correctness, wokeness, whatever label you prefer for it. That 4th quarter is the most intensely political, partisan, ideological, and propagandistic. People would not have much of an issue if it was just those first 3 quarters. But the irony is that like the first 3 quarters, I think you'd find a lot of conservatives who would say, "Yeah, this is something."
I teach African American history every year because I teach con law, and I mean I got to teach Dred Scott. I got to teach when enslavement began in the United States, when it ended, what the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment is, what the Lincoln-Douglas debates were, what Frederick Douglass said. I teach it every year. I think it's invaluable. But this was CRT on steroids. But back to NBC, MSNBC is part of a news organization. I don't know that the Republicans can let NBC run a debate. I really don't. I'm going to the RNC tomorrow, and I've never questioned about CNN or NBC Major, but if NBC allows that vitriol, what do you think? Should they be allowed to run a GOP debate?
I've heard over the years that there's been tension between NBC News as an institution and MSNBC, thinking back to the Keith Olbermann days, right? MSNBC has always had not just liberal, not just left of center, but like hard left progressive hosts.
Radical.
Who basically, what? I'm sorry?
Radical.
They basically, and that they're the prime time. Very much as there's a difference between what you see on, say, Bret Baier or some of these programs on Fox News and what you might see on Sean Hannity or one of the other primetime hosts. There's a different tone between an opinion show and a news show. Having said that, the opinion show, like, why would a Republican want to appear? You don't see a lot of Republican guests on Joy Reid's program. Probably because maybe she can't book them because she's still looking for the time traveler who hacked her web address or website all those years ago.
Yeah, that's what I never bring up. I just think at some point a news organization has to wonder whether they are really a news organization anymore if they allow that. Jim Geraghty, colleague, I will rag on you after you've been out of my colleague stuff, for 10 years or so. By the way, did you see Chad O'Shea is interviewing with the Jets? The Jets are trying to hire the Browns receivers coach. What's that tell you, Jim Geraghty, about the Jets?
My understanding is that they've interviewed 30 people for the offensive coordinator position. And I think when you have 30 candidates, you don't really have any candidates.
Chad O'Shea is a pretty good guy. Thank you, Jim Geraghty from National Review and the Washington Post. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Steve Daines is the senator from Montana. He's been selected by his colleagues in the GOP conference to run the National Republican Senatorial Committee, NRSC.org, for 2024, and the map looks good. Senator Daines, welcome. I hope this is a regular call as we check up on your efforts. Tell us about your plans for the NRSC this year.
Well, Hugh, as you mentioned, the map does look good. It is a very good map for Republicans, but we can't fall in love with the map. We've got some formidable Democrats that are serving in red states, but the top three target states will be Montana, West Virginia, Ohio. We've got John Tester, Joe Manchin, and Sherrod Brown. These are states where virtually all, statewide Democrats have lost over the years. There's only one statewide elected official in Montana that's a Democrat. That's John Tester. There's only one statewide elected official in West Virginia. That's Joe Manchin. There's only one statewide elected official that's a Democrat in Ohio. That's Sherrod Brown. And so they're really endangered species at the moment. And you look at it as a presidential year with the presidential election going on. Montana is going to vote for the Republican presidential candidate by 15 to 20 points. West Virginia by 35 to 40 points. Ohio by 7 to 10 points. So we start with an incredible pickup opportunity with those three states.
Now, Senator, this is controversial, what I'm about to ask you. I don't expect a complete answer yet. I want the NRSC to play in primaries. Not all of them. I want them to support, for example, Jim Banks and try and keep that field clear so we don't waste money on a seat that's easy for Jim Banks to win in Indiana. Montana, you've got two congressmen. They're both friends of yours, Ryan Zinke and Matt Rosendale. I don't know if you can do that in Montana. In West Virginia, you're going to have like 20 candidates. What is the NRSC's position going to be about participating early and identifying a candidate who is the strongest candidate who can win and funding them before the primary vote?
Yeah. Well, Hugh, if there's something that we learned from the 22 cycle is that we've got to get candidates that can win a primary, but importantly can win a general election. I'm sick and tired of losing. And at the end of the day, winners make policy and losers go home. We've got to find candidates that not only can win primaries, but can win general elections. So it's still very early, but it's not lost on us that we will do whatever it takes to win to make sure that in 24 we have a Republican majority. Hugh, here's why as well. If you look a little bit longer term, look to the end of the decade. If you look at the 24 cycle, the 26 cycle, and the 28 cycle, in 2024, as I mentioned earlier, we have 3 Democrats up in red states. Those are great pickup opportunities. But you look at 26, there are 0. You look at 28, there are 0. Hugh, we either deliver a majority in 24, or we could see the United States Senate with an enduring minority as Republicans for the rest of the decade. The stakes could not be higher. It's very important we win general elections.
Now, the NRSC obviously gets a lot of big donor support, but they need small donor support as well. How is the small donor campaign going?
Well, listen, the Democrats, as we know, has figured out small donor donations. They figured out how to get those $25 recurring donations. And the reason that is so potent and powerful for the Democrats and why we've got to work to close that gap is that those are hard dollars. What I mean by hard dollars, those are campaign dollars that candidates use directly, and they can buy media, a candidate, at 1/3 to even 1/10 of the cost of a super PAC. We saw that in Nevada, for example, where a candidate that wanted to spend money in the Las Vegas media market was one thing, but if a super PAC tried to spend the Las Vegas market, they paid 10 times more on rates than a candidate. So these small dollar donations going to candidates are critical. And we've already launched a website here. It's called Senate24.com, Senate24.com, where supporters can provide donations, small dollars, $25, $50 donations. And what we're doing is we're escrowing those funds right now, and we'll apply those on the targets on our 3 top states, which is Montana, West Virginia, Ohio. Once the primary is complete, we'll move those dollars, those hard dollars, directly to candidates That's Senate24.com. We're getting an early start on that with digital fundraising.
You know, Senator Daines, I didn't know about that rule until J.D. Vance wrote afterwards that the small dollar is actually worth 10 times what a PAC contribution is because of the rate card rules of the FEC. And that just turned me into an apostle for $25 donations. And I hope lots of people go to Senate. Is it Senate, the number 2, the number 4, Senate 24?
It's just Senate spelled out and then 24.com, Senate24.com. So we're starting that now. You know, Lindsey Graham has always been the master. He'll go on TV and he'll put lindseygraham.com and he'll raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. And those are hard dollars, just as J.D. Vance mentioned. He's exactly right. And you know, we had a lot of issues in 22 around why we came up short. But one of the reasons is our candidates were underfunded on hard dollars by massive amounts.
One of the other reasons, Senator, is that some of our candidates were not very skilled in communicating. And I wonder, are you going to put on a boot camp for candidates? I look at, for example, in Ohio, Sherrod Brown is a gifted communicator. Now, I am a Buckeye. I've followed his career forever. I know how he's won before, but he is vulnerable. If you nominate Matt Dolan or Bernie Moreno, he will get beat. I don't care which of those two. He will get beat by either of those guys because they're both gifted communicators. But some people want, you know, you could kidnap Doug Ducey and drag him down to Arizona and win that Senate seat. But I think the Chamber of Commerce wants him to come and save them. What are you going to do? And he doesn't need any training, but what are you going to do with people who don't really know how to do this on the national level?
No, you're right, Hugh, because, you know, speaking as somebody who came from the private sector into politics, I mean, it is there's an important, I'll call it sales and marketing operation needed to be effective to win races, because you are the product as a candidate, and that affects your fundraising to get donors to give to your particular candidacy. But what we're going to do is we will have a boot camp operation where I remember I had this when I ran for the Senate in 2014. I was the first Republican elected to the seat in Montana 100 years. You know, we had an uphill climb, but we won. And they brought us into a TV studio, and they would throw questions at you, tough questions, and videotape you on your responses and train you to be a better communicator, first and foremost on the tough questions, but overall just staying on a simple and concise message. Hugh, when I ran, it was a 4-word message: more jobs, less government. I came from the private sector. I was a job creator, so I camped on the fact I knew how to create jobs, more jobs. And what conservatives want, what we want as Republicans, is less government. Keep it concise, stay on message, and it's a winning formula.
You know, my wife's best friend just moved to Montana. I don't know why. She left California. I know why people leave California. She moved to Montana, and I told her, go sign up for Ryan Zinke and start helping him get elected to Senate. Has Ryan announced yet?
No, Ryan has not announced. He just won that House race. I've known Ryan. Ryan Zinke and I went to Boy State together in 1979 when we were juniors in high school. I've known Ryan a long time. So there's nobody's announced yet for the Senate race in Montana, so it's still early.
Okay, so we got anyone. Pat Morrissey announced in West Virginia. Matt Dolan announced in Ohio. I thought Ryan had announced in Montana, but I wasn't sure.
No, he hasn't. Nope.
Okay, let me look at some of the reaches. I think we can win Wisconsin with a good presidential ticket. I think we can, but you got to go get somebody to run, and Gallagher's not going to do it because he's running the Select Committee on China. I think, Maryland is a long shot. If Ben Cardin runs, it's possible that people are tired of 80-year-old senators. What do you think? Are there some long shots? What about Virginia and Winsome Sears? Tim Kaine is like the blandest man. I'm a nice guy, but he's the blandest man in America. Winsome Sears is the opposite of that. What do you think?
Right. Well, you've named, by the way, some great potential candidates, but I think if you look at the presidential battleground states in 2024, there's 5. You look at out west, of course, Arizona and Nevada are going to be battleground states that Biden narrowly won in 2020. Then you've got Wisconsin, as you mentioned. You've got Pennsylvania and Michigan. There's an open seat in Michigan because Senator Stabenow announced her retirement. Those are all states with the right candidate. We can win in a presidential battleground type year. So I think 24 is shaping up to be a very good year for Republicans. Now, we thought we had a better outcome coming in 22. I understand the disappointment. I hate to see what happened. But I really, and there's reasons to be just quantifiably optimistic right now in 24 looking at the map. However, you can't fall in love with that map, as we talked about, because we're running as formidable Democrats who understand how to win in a red state.
Let's close by talking about that team up north, that state up north. I'm from Ohio, so Michigan, basically they can fall into the sea, and I don't care, even though I went to law school there. But we could win Michigan. Republicans could win Michigan. We have in the past. It takes a center-right candidate. You cannot be an activist conservative candidate in Michigan and win. Does everyone understand that, Senator Daines? It's not a state like Ohio. It's not red like Missouri. It's a light blue state. It can be won, but you cannot nominate an activist from the far right.
Yeah, well, I think you see that's true, frankly, in most states, Hugh. I mean, I come back, the first president I got to vote for was Ronald Reagan. The happy warrior, the common sense conservative. Nobody doubted Reagan's conservative credentials, but he had the ability to win. At the end of the day, we've got to be attracting people to us. And we really, I think, repelled voters, particularly independent voters. You look at what happened in 22, independent voters voted for the Democrat, D+2 in a midterm. We should have had a massive wave of independence. It was the independent wave that broke the other way that cost us 22. You look at past midterms, 2010, 2014 with Obama in the White House. It was R+19, R+14 in those two midterm elections for independent voters. In 2022, independent voters broke D+2.
Wow.
That, I think, is really the core of what we face in 24. And it was not a problem. The red wave showed up in terms of the red echo chamber. Republican voters and conservatives showed up and voted in 22. The problem was independent voters did not like what they were seeing with many of our Republican candidates, to your point, Hugh, and they voted for Democrats. Soft Republicans either did not vote or they actually went Democrat.
Look, Senate 24 is wherever you ought to go. Senate24.com, Senate the number 24.com. Get Steve Daines the help that he needs, because we got to win this map this time. And I mean, we being Republicans, I'm an out and about Republican, proud of it, going down to the RNC. By the way, Steve, have you endorsed Ronna McDaniel for re-election as chairwoman?
I have. Yep. I'm on the record of endorsing Ronna. Yep.
So have I. I hope I see her tomorrow, and I will continue to talk. Anytime you want time, come on. We got to win this map, because the new Republican president and Speaker McCarthy and Majority Leader McConnell got lots of work to do. So good luck to you, Steve Daines. Keep coming back. Always a pleasure. I've not been allowed back in Montana since I fished out the Madison River a couple of years ago, but Steve's a good guy. Maybe he'll get me back into Montana. I'll be right back, America. Mollie Hemingway is next. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Studio West, going down to the RNC tomorrow. Dwayne will be sitting in for me on Thursday and Friday when I'm at the Republican National Committee meeting. Mollie Hemingway is with Fox News, also the Federalist. Good morning, Mollie. How are you?
Great to be here with you.
Mollie, I want to talk about the searches of the Biden houses. Has anyone in your hearing brought up the fact there is this grand jury looking into Hunter Biden? I would just like Jean Pierre to be asked, has a grand jury subpoena been issued either to the president, the first lady, or any entity controlling those homes? Has that been asked by anyone?
I don't believe it's been asked, and I wish that you could guide the White House press corps to ask better questions about what's going on. She keeps saying, oh, there's a special counsel probe. I can't answer anything. There are plenty of things she could answer. There was no limit to the number of questions asked when President Trump was under a special counsel probe by the White House press corps. But all of a sudden they've gotten very incurious, or they're just not asking good enough questions. I do think this is related to the probe of the Biden family business, where you sort of trade on the Biden name, with foreign oligarchs giving a lot of money to the Biden family in exchange for we're not exactly sure what. And we do know that, that U.S. attorney has been investigating that. I assume it's reasonable to assume that this document issue is related to that probe, but we haven't gotten a good enough line of questioning to do.
And it's such an easy, I keep getting a note from a very experienced AUSA DOJ official, White House former counsel, and former counsel's office, and telling me, look, this has got all the earmark. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm a DOJ alum, but I'm not a prosecutor. And if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it looks like a response to a subpoena. It's a very easy question to ask, Mollie. Has the president or anyone around him received a subpoena? And what's wrong with the White House press counsel? Do they just not know anything?
I don't know. And I mean, the thing is, it's such a reasonable assumption that it's a good question to ask. And if she says no, you could say, well, then you really got to explain to us why, before the special counsel ever got involved, why were attorneys going through these documents? Why would you send an attorney to do moving of papers when they cost so much per hour? It doesn't make any sense if it's not a response to a subpoena. So make it make sense for us if you're going to deny that that's what's going on.
Second story that I see nowhere reported. I have dealt with the National Archives and Record Administration since John Agresta was nominated to be the archivist and shot down by the archivist community in 1986 by Ronald Reagan. I've dealt with him as the leader of a presidential library, as the director of an executive. They are a left-wing bunch. And I don't mean soft left-wing, I mean hard left-wing. David Ferriero, retired, was fair. His deputy, Jay, was a good guy. But after that, it's just all career left-wing. Has anyone done any reporting on the archives' involvement and their disparate treatment of Republicans versus Democrats?
Actually, Margot Cleveland, our senior legal writer at The Federalist, months ago did a look into this. Because of how weird it was with that raid on Mar-a-Lago,
Yep.
It is, as you know, very common to have paperwork disputes with the National Archives. The way they went so aggressive so quickly, and she did kind of figure out that it was this one individual who started the whole thing, kind of an Alexander Vindman character, and dug into what his background was. And he is, in fact, a very left-wing person. He quit, he resigned in part so he could be replaced by President Biden with someone, who could kind of continue the fight. He's been very aggressive here. No one's been looking into the bureaucracy at the National Archives and how politically motivated they are, even as we recognize that the Department of Justice has some troubles with not being politically consistent, depending on whether it's.
I hope you'll repost the link to Margot's piece. I have dealt with them on these classification deals. This is so out of bounds of the ordinary way that the Trump thing versus the Biden thing, and now the Pence thing. And I just think someone's got to look at the archives, and I would not confirm a new archivist. There's a vacancy. I would not confirm an archivist until the Senate got into that. So, Mollie, I'm going down. I'm a big Ronna McDaniel fan. What do you think of that race? I don't know if you're for Harmeet. I like Harmeet too, but I don't think it's time to change a chairman in the middle of an election cycle.
Yeah, I don't take a position, and I assume that Ronna will win re-election here just because she seems to have the votes lined up. But I just hope no matter who is elected, whether it's Ronna up for another term or someone else, that they really work on making sure that election integrity is something they continue to focus on. Ronna has done a good job with that, making that a very big focus in terms of litigation and really ramping up efforts there. Republicans were just pretty much AWOL for a few decades, and recently they have started to play in this game. It's a very important place because you can't win if you don't have good, free, fair.
Amen. And Rigg talks about that. Your book talks about that. I hope that I think she and David Bossie have a plan for these debates. I am tired of left-wingers asking candidates for the Republican nomination questions. What do you think, Mollie?
It's unacceptable to have political activists who comprise the propaganda press asking questions of Republican candidates. It just can't continue. And it's been frustrating for a long time, but I'm very glad that also recently the Republicans said, we're no longer going to play this game. We're no longer going to have people who are just politicians, these people in the press who are just politicians, acting like they are in any way capable of moderating a debate between two different political groups.
That's it. You and I are conservatives. I'm an out-and-out Republican. I'm not sure you are, but I know what we would do, and the questions we ask are very different from legacy media. And I am tired of hearing legacy media advance DNC talking points. Mollie Hemingway, thank you. Follow her at MZ Hemingway on Twitter. Follow me to tomorrow, though I won't be here. Generalissimo will be. I'm about to do the grand old pod for today, and then I'll be back on Monday. Until then, thank you. Listen to Dwayne tomorrow. Go easy on him. He's a rookie. I'm Hugh Hewitt.